and welcome to On Topic. I'm your host, Catherine Talbot. It's a sunny afternoon here in Zwolle and it's 2:30. This afternoon we're going to be looking into the concept of death in the Islamic faith. But first, the headlines.
No-go zones.
Where Muslim density is very intense, where the police don't go in.
American commentator Stephen Emerson shared some controversial claims about the UK on Fox News.
And in Britain, it's not just no-go zones. There are actual cities like Birmingham that are totally Muslim, where non-Muslims just simply don't go in.
I don't understand how people who know nothing at all about our city can profess to talk about the city's diversity and its demographic makeup. It's just ridiculous.
Birmingham is one of the best places to be.
Where women wear burqas to hide their identities.
I think that might be their religion.
Jessie Egan is a Christian and she's wearing a hijab. She wants to remind herself what it feels like to be an outsider.
When we treat people as if they're outsiders, they will inevitably feel like outsiders and they will look for belonging elsewhere.
Emwazi is now identified by Western officials as Jihadi John.
Jihadi John.
Jihadi John.
That brutal ISIS executioner.
Former hostages describe Emwazi as one of 4 especially sadistic British captors.
Many British jihadis come from comfortable, non-practicing Muslim backgrounds and speak English at home.
Meet a Muslim family. Local Muslims are opening their mosque and their homes in the hope of building greater understanding. Extremists do not reflect the values of the majority.
With recent activities from IS and other Muslim extremists, we're going to explore the relationship between ideological killings and the Islamic faith. Can the ideological killings be related to this concept? We're joined in the studio by our guest, Aya Johanna Danielle Durst-Breet. Aya is a Muslim herself and has studied Arabic language and culture at Leiden University, where she also completed her master's into the research of Islamic studies. Hello, Aya. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invite.
So, Aya, have you always been a Muslim?
No, I haven't. Actually, I was baptized as a Christian on a very young age. I was enrolled at a Christian primary school, so I'm familiar with Bible stories or biblical stories. And I must say I was already fascinated by Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East. By that time, I was always drawing these colorful scenes from Thousand and One Nights, Arabian stories, veiled women, Arabian horses. So at a fairly young age, I was already interested in the area.
So at what age was it you became a Muslim?
I think around my 20s that I was more seriously coming to know more about Islam, and I also proclaimed the Shahada. But I've always been very much interested in the mystical side of Islam, which people refer to as Sufism or Tasawwuf. And that had also a lot to do with poetry I read from Hafiz or Rumi and other Persian Sufi poets and philosophers.
So it's something you've always been interested in?
Yes.
Now we're going to look into what Muslims believe happens to them when they die. The afterlife is very important in the Islamic faith. Islam teaches that this life is preparation for the afterlife. Could you tell us a bit about what you believe is going to happen to you when you die?
Well, I used to say that there's possibly a difference between what I personally believe or think and what mainstream Islam predicts or says about it, or what Muslims believe. Usually, the general view is that when you die, you come or you enter a certain life in between, life of the soul, and you reside in this in-betweenness until the day of judgment, Yom al-Qiyamah, when the soul is being called upon and arises. It's like a resurrection in a way. And when you die, usually then there is this sort of balancing between what did you do in your life, what kind of intention have you displayed, and will you be rewarded with paradise or will you be sent to hell for your deeds?
And for you, is this the essence of the Islamic faith?
No, it's not the essence of the Islamic faith, but it's the common view that when you die, you enter like this in-betweenness, and then you will be resurrected on this judgment day. Personally, I believe that when you die, your soul leaves your body, like what Muslims believe. But to me, there's no such thing as an in-betweenness or hell or paradise. I think that's, in my view, it's a certain way to frame a view for believers, so they have sort of something to look forward to or to be afraid of. So a conditioning factor or a conditioning circumstance which helps them in their faith to be good Muslims.
Yeah. Muslims believe that one day decided by Allah, life on earth will come to an end. On this day, everyone will face judgment by Allah. Muslims believe that they will remain in their graves until this day. Our reporters Jesse, John and Valentina looked deeper into this. They spoke to Erwin de Faal, who is a clergyman of the Christian Church. The Christian and Islamic faith have both similarities and differences. Erwin de Faal tells us about what Christians believe of life after death.
Most of the Christians that are more or less orthodox, so quite conservative in their beliefs, will say that there is a heaven, the sphere of God and the angels, and that when you die, your spirit or your soul is lifted up to the higher spheres of the heavens, and there it will have eternal life. That's a bit the classic way to see it. And for Protestant Christians, which are rather orthodox, I think many people of them do believe that. But in these days, even more people think that it's, well, you don't know anything sure about it. So it's not a reason about having doubt. Do I come in? Will I go to heaven after I'm died? Will I be good enough to go there? That's not really the problem, but more, is it possible that there are heavens, or is this all here in this world? Huh? So is the inner world here down below, is that all there is? And that doesn't mean that you can't believe in a God or in transcendence, but the reality that is bigger than this life and this world doesn't really mean that there has to be a heaven. So, and I am somewhere in between. I hope there is but what is even more important for me is that there is the belief that God. There's a Negro spiritual, a very beautiful song which says he's got the whole world in his hands. Perhaps you know, he got the whole world in his hands.
So Christians believe in a heaven where their souls are taken immediately after death. How is this interpreted from the Quran and the Islamic faith? Jan Berenhout from Amsterdam told our reporters what he believes as a Muslim.
So historically, when you read what I do, the Quran in its historical context, then you have totally different interpretations about this from the same text. And the persons you like to question, the Salafists, the Orthodox Muslims, they say we have to live like the Prophet did. Well, then he always said, you came on to my appointment on a motorbike, and the Prophet should come on a camel. Maar en ook op kameel, de profeet. That's not true. You have to see to whom the Prophet was speaking 1400 years ago. Yeah. What is the meaning of the word? What were the social, economical environment? You may marry as a man, as a male, with maximum of 4 women. That's not because I have 1 woman, I want to marry you and I marry you as well. No. There were wars going on, fightings. So when my brother is dying, I have to marry his widow, his wife, to give her a kind of insurance. I have to take care of her. Not to create children with my brother's wife. I have to take care of my mother. In that way, I could maybe have maximum of 3 or 4 wives. Polygamy was not polygamy because you want to have 4 beautiful young women around you. And besides that, the rules waarmee that made it possible are very strict. You must treat them equally. That's not possible.
Islam teaches that on this judgment day it will be decided if the person should go to heaven or hell. It is through their behaviour in this life that allows Allah to decide. Aya, what does judgment day mean exactly?
Well, it means that there's this balance being made, like two angels will actually question you. What have you been doing in your lives? What was the intention that you displayed, as I mentioned before? And intention, niyyah, is very, very important to a Muslim. It's like everything. Your intention counts, like the way that you intend to do something, how you pray, why you fast during Ramadan, why you go on a Hajj, your pilgrimage to Mecca, why you give zakat or these charitable amounts of money or other things you do for the poor. So if you have lived your life as a righteous Muslim and you've been doing all these good deeds and did what was expected from you as a Muslim, then there's this fair chance that you'll go to paradise. And some people use this deliberately to commit good deeds because it's rewarding for them and the intention counts. But if you do all kinds of things in the name of Islam or in the name of God, whilst you have like a rotten intention, or you act from your ego, your lower ego, or just by greed or lust, it doesn't count. And on the day of judgment, God knows, Allah knows what you did and for what reason. So even if on the outside level it seems like you've behaved like a righteous Muslim, or you think that you have behaved as a righteous Muslim and you've been committing your deeds in the name of your faith, it might be that at the lower basis of your intention, things weren't that righteous at all. Or if you tell everybody that you've been sending money to the poor, or if you've been supporting the building of a mosque, but it was only for your name, for your fame to resound in that way, then it's not rewarding. So you see that there is this,
so it's
it depends on the intention, what will happen. And you might think that you do all these good things, but in the end, like your bank account of scales of rewarding and punishment, it might not be as rewardful, the life you lived, as you think. But that will be clear at Judgment Day.
And does it affect whether you go to heaven or hell if you're a non-believer or a believer?
Well, general Muslims, or in general, Muslims believe that when you're a non-believer, you will be sent straight to hell. But within Islam, there's so many views and there's so many Islams in that regard. You could say basically that you have these 5 pillars of Islam, but everyone interprets the Islam and what's been written in the Quran and all these verses. It's a very personal interpretation, and that's why you have all these brands within Islam and all these currents and all these different visions, even among scholars. So there might be in Cairo at Al-Azhar University a fatwa being issued against some practice within the Muslim world, whilst another theologian, like in Iraq, for instance, IS theologist might say, no, and this isn't true, and this is not real Islam, and he's an unbeliever to issue such a fatwa. So it's
different.
So many different views in this regard.
So we're going to look now at what a Muslim funeral looks like. For non-Muslims, you'll probably get dressed in a fancy suit or dress, lie in a coffin for a couple of days and get buried in your hometown. But it's very different for Muslims. There are even several Islamic cemeteries in Holland. Our reporters Silke and Rachel visited one in Groningen to find out more, and they spoke to the owner of the cemetery.
This is the place where they bring the body outside, in presence of family and friends, and the imam. Here they say their prayers. They wash their hands and their feet, and then they will bring the coffin to the grave.
Michel Hadini and his family also followed Islamic rituals after the death of his father.
What we have done is that there was a friend from my father, and he's telling me that we make him clean 3 times. I don't know the name from the oil.
Special oil.
Special oil. Yes, then I do a massage for my father, and then we have white sheets.
And you wrap him in the sheets.
Yes.
As you can see, this cemetery is basic. There are a lot of graves without a stone, without flowers.
Normal, the most people go to Morocco binnen 3 days. Maar mijn vader had zich niet verzekerd.
He wasn't insured.
Yes.
So he had to stay in Holland.
We don't know that. And when we heard that, we must do it another way because it's many money, and I have not the money to pay that.
So that's
it was
why
more than 10,000.
There are no women allowed to be present at the funeral. Why is that?
Because the most men say that the women are crying too loud, there's too much noise, women are too emotional. And but what we do see is the younger people who die and get buried here, they do have Western friends from school, and we see the difference that they do bring women.
I see that all the graves are pointed in one direction. Why is that?
In Islamic funeral, it's very important that the person who died is facing the east, with the face to Mecca.
And how long will these graves stay here? Will they be removed one day?
Well, that's the question, because one of the rules of an Islamic graveyard is the graves can't be removed. But we rent the graves for 30 years and some of the graves for 10 years. In that case, we will need to think about, are we going to remove or don't we?
It's important for us to distinguish the difference between a Christian funeral and a Muslim one in order to understand the faith better. For Muslims, the funeral is a passage to the afterlife. Women are not present, and rituals such as washing the body take place. The process happens quickly. Muslims have a funeral within 24 hours of the death. This differs from the Christian funeral process, which could take longer than a week. Aya, how important do you think the funeral is to Muslims after a person's passed away?
It's quite important because it's a way to say goodbye. One very important part of the ritual before the body of the deceased person is being taken away to the cemetery is that the believers who are present pay their, how to say that, phrase that in English?
Pay their respects?
Yeah, pay their respects to the person, but also they are being asked to forgive the deceased person if there was anything still standing in between, or if there was a debt that still needed to be paid, that it was renunciated. Is that the proper word?
Yeah.
That they don't mind anymore, so that the person who was deceased can just enter indeed his afterlife, and also the person who stays behind has no harsh feelings towards the deceased person.
And why is it that it happens so quickly with the time, 24 hours is quite a quick time?
Well, I think practically just in more Muslim-dominated lands like around Mediterranean Sea, the temperature, it's very hot and the body starts decomposing very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it has become part of like ritual also for Muslims here, that if they want to be sent home to be buried in the soil of their youth or their where they come from, their origins, that it happens quickly because it's part of the ritual. But naturally, money is an issue. It's a matter if, as a family, if you are able to send your father, your mother, your uncle back to the country of origin, if you have saved for this or not. And it can also be a conscious option just to be buried in the country where you reside. Like here in the Netherlands, there are Muslim cemeteries. So it's a matter of choice and a matter of circumstances in that regard.
Yeah. Recently there's been a lot in the news about Muslim terrorist attacks and suicide bombers. There's often a misconception that suicide is suggested from the Quran, but like many other religions, Islam views suicide as a sin. Wasim Al-Saqaf is a teacher here at Windesheim University of Applied Sciences. Our reporters Annie and Marlin interviewed Wasim at the university about how Islam looks at euthanasia and committing suicide.
Islam means that you give up yourself to God, to Allah, and everything is happening to you, happened or will happen to you, you have to accept it. If you are ill, you have to accept that and you have to live with that. If you don't accept that and you decide to suicide, you are not accepting what Allah or God gives you. And from this perspective, suicide in Islam is not allowed. The Quran says that everyone did suicide will go to hell.
Belchin Asakaf says that according to the Quran, all the good things that a Muslim has done in life won't mean anything if the person commits suicide.
You will not be treated as a good believer.
Euthanasia is the same as killing someone in Islam, and you're not allowed to decide when to finish your life. The only time it's okay to kill someone is in a war, as Muslims are expected to protect their country.
Yeah, there's something that you have to do to be sure that no one take the control of his country or of his own property. You have to defeat that. And if you are in a war and you kill someone, then is it another story.
Does suicide bomber go to heaven if the person does it to protect the country?
No, because killing yourself is not acceptable. Or if you are going to protect your country with that. There is a story in the time of the Prophet that someone was in a war, he got injured and he decided to kill himself in the war. And the Prophet said, yeah, he's going to the hell because he decided to kill himself.
Why do you think some Muslims commit suicide if that is prohibited by the Quran?
A lot of Muslims don't read what the Quran says and they just follow some leader and commit suicide, and they think they do that because of loving Allah. Every situation you have in life, you get it from Allah, from God, and you have to deal with that. If that's good or bad, you have just to deal with it. If you decide, I don't want to deal with that, you are not accepting the Islam as a religion. Everything you get in this life, you are getting it from God. And you have to be happy with everything.
That was Wazim talking to Marlon and Annie about how Islam looks at euthanasia and committing suicide. We heard there that you go to hell if you take your own life. The Quran says, "Take not life, which God hath made sacred, except by way of justice and law. Thus doth he command you that ye may learn wisdom." Aya, how do you interpret this?
Well, then we encounter the concept of jihad also. It's related. Jihad means, to strive for something. And often people think of this outer action you have to undertake, like to guard something or to protect something in a war, like what this other person, Wasim, was explaining. For people who are more mystically inclined, like the Sufis, jihad is foremost an inner concept that you have to master your own desires, your own lust, your sense of greed or jealousy. And they focus far more upon that as an inner activity and a test. If you look at the circumstances now in like ancient Mesopotamia, like the current Levant or Iraq, you see that murder it's like the order of the day. It's like common, and also that people deliberately murder others from a different faith or a different brand in Islam. And for me, then I wonder, what do they think? They think they are justified to do so because they believe, or they have been taught to believe by their leader, like it's a good deed. You have to do this, and you can rape, and you can torture, and you can decapitate someone. But then, in my view, they decide about the fate and the life of someone else. And the people they've been kidnapping, murdering, torturing, raping, they were innocent. They were not taking up arms against them. They were deliberately going to these people and to commit harm, to do them harm. So in my view, I'm not in any position to say anything about someone else who is living his life, but in my view, I wonder, how could you call yourself a Muslim whilst you inflict so much harm upon other people? And if they die, the harm they have caused, it won't be erased. People live with the loss of loved ones, and cities or villages were torn apart. People suffer, lost relatives. So after the people who committed these crimes die, you could say their account of good deeds or sinful deeds, there is still this thing going on that what they have done, it's still increasing, because people always remember the loss, always remember the horror, always remember what has happened. It's not for the good of all. There is no, in my view, my personal view, there is no good things coming from this, only this disrupting force in the region, which is really tearing the region apart.
And with all these killings, we often hear a lot of negative news about Islam. So let's listen to some of the headlines.
Direct firefights with ISIS militants, once more battling at the front lines.
They captured my village and gave me a choice, he told us. Either join ISIS or be beheaded.
Speak to you about what the United States will do with our friends and allies to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL.
ISIS has embarked on a reign of fear. Mufleh told us he was a witness to massacres when ISIS seized villages in Syria.
ISIS is a radical Islamist organization dedicated to wiping out everybody who's not prepared to convert to Islam.
How do you feel about the actions of IS and extremists, Aya?
I think it's a bunch of psychopaths, honestly. I mean, if you are a decent human being, how could you behave in such a way, regardless of your faith or conviction? I mean, especially as a more Sufism-orientated Muslim, to me, I mean, we are a brotherhood of man. We are all connected. What we do has influence on the people around us, on the circumstances around us. And I always seek to do what's, in my view, also good for others, or to connect people, or to bring about greater harmony between people, or to support those initiatives that have a bridging function and can bring about more understanding between parties within my network, circle of friends or family, or at a more national or regional level. To see what they are doing in the name of Islam, in their vision and interpretation of Islam, it's really a horror. It's like a very, very real nightmare, because so much media attention is given to these atrocities, and they're at the same time happening other things in the world as well. But the problem with the media is that people will take it for something granted, like, oh, it gets so much attention. People who are not knowing so much about the diversity in the Muslim world, in the Islamic regions, they think that is like dominant Islam, whilst it's a bunch of, crazy people in my view.
Yeah, it's just one interpretation.
Exactly,
of the Quran.
But they get so much attention that it's like, that is Islam. Like the mainstream Islam, and it's only a very strict extremist interpretation of Islam, and people are joining them for, I think, various reasons.
Yeah. Our reporters, Lisa and Zoe, they went to Amsterdam to speak to Jan Berenhout. Jan became a Muslim at the age of 16 and has worked at the Dutch-Turkish Association NTV, as well as taking the role of Deputy Mayor of Amsterdam East for 20 years. He shares his own story of becoming a Muslim, as well as giving an insight into the recent terrorist attacks by Muslims.
If you ask me, how did you become a Muslim? That's a long story, but I cannot answer the question whether I am a Muslim or not. My father died when I was 14. I started to collect religion. And I ask everywhere, what do you believe? Why do you believe? And on a certain day, the preacher of the mosque asked me, what do you think about Muhammad? So you think that Muhammad is a prophet of God? I said, yes. And you think that there is one God? I said, yes. Well, congratulations, then you are Muslim. Think about a boy or a girl of 16 years who is alone, and you want to belong to something.
So, as a Muslim, what do you believe about the afterlife?
I don't know what I have to believe. I don't know whether I should be afraid or not. It's quite possible that there is something in afterlife. But I don't know what there is. And I do not know what I can expect, is there a paradise? But it reigns, since there can be a punishment in the afterlife, it reigns my moral attitudes. You should be good. Don't do other people what you dislike yourself.
There is a lot of news items about the terroristic attacks made by Muslim extremists. What do you feel when you see these events on the news?
They have no idea how much these activities harm the position of Muslims in the Netherlands. There are people in ISIS, Islamic State, who believe that to reach the so much wanted Islamic State, everything is permitted. Lying, cheating, killing, war, as long as it brings the Islamic State nearer. So when I express my doubtness about Islamic rules, then am I, in their eyes, I am already a traitor and an enemy of the Islamic State. Quran says about killing is that you only may kill other people when they try to kill you. Islam is the first religion that put a restriction on it. If you harm me, I may harm you again as a revenge, but never more than you harm me.
What do you think about those killings of non-believers?
Should be nice and honest and to all my people in my surroundings, to my neighbors, to my friends and so on, that all those rules are not followed in Islamic countries. There are no Islamic countries. According to my opinion, there are no Muslims in their attitudes, way of thinking. One of the most important verses of the Quran. And you cannot be forced to accept Islam. So I cannot understand that you get the idea that you can kill them because they do not believe what you believe. I cannot understand it. It's far away from me. They think they have the right to kill other people. And I think when you are killing other people, then you are not acting as a Muslim, because the Holy Quran states 26 times God will punish who he wants to punish. So I do not accept any violent activities of Muslims.
So we've talked about how IS is not a clear representation of the Islamic faith. Are you still proud to be a part of the faith, or do you kind of regret becoming a Muslim?
No, not at all. It's just I've realized over the years that people are a bit confused in my personal circle if they hear I'm a Muslim, because they think like, what do you believe then? And are you with them, with those criminal kind of Muslims, ES? And they start to project certain things, like, oh, then because you are a Muslim, then this or that or that. I must say there has been a time that I was wearing a headscarf after I returned from Egypt. I've been there a few months for study in 2005, and I was used to living on the countryside amongst Christians and Muslims alike, and everybody was wearing a headscarf there, also the Christians. And it felt so much easier for me to adjust. But then when I came back to the Netherlands, I felt so, I don't know, a bit typical when I would take it off. So I decided, okay, let's see. It would be an interesting experiment to keep it on. But then I found that people who didn't know me at all, people with a Muslim background, they would almost congratulate me and come up to me and say, oh, that's so wonderful. You are, what's the word? You became a Muslim, and oh, how nice. And I thought, well, but you don't even know me. You don't know what about my past, about what I do, about my views. I thought it was so easy for them to respond to me like that, a bit naive even. But on the other hand, I found so many people who used to know me, for instance, at university. They were suddenly so fearful and started discussing with me, like, oh, you're a woman, how can you do that? And it's a stupid religion, and they treat women bad, and we thought you were so clever. And so there was a lot of judgment, and people didn't even know where I was coming from.
So people's opinions changed just because you'd put a headscarf on.
Exactly. And well, to me, there is so much more to a person or the reasons why they do what they do than meets the eye. And I decided after a few weeks, like, okay, well, this is between me and Allah. And for me, if you respect someone, the respect should be in the way how you deal with people and how you view people. If I would be a man and I see a woman with a miniskirt, this short skirt, or even naked, I don't have to harm her or to rape her or even to touch her or lay my eyes on her. I can also just decide not to look. You know, it's also part of your character, how you think about these things. And I thought, well, you know, I'll just behave the way I feel I can behave and I want to behave, whilst I try to respect people around me, be it with a headscarf or without. I mean, and you have all kinds of regulations what you ought to do and you can do, like drinking, yes or no. It's prohibited generally in Islam. But once in so many months, sometimes I enjoy half a glass of wine because I can't stand alcohol, basically. So I'm not a drinker myself, but even if I would, I don't feel bad about it to do so. But because I know myself and I know, okay, this is like, I can take this and I don't do anything else. I won't take more.
Yeah, so it's important to show that everyone has a different interpretation.
Yes, and also what I want to say, if I would visit a mosque or would be amongst people who appreciate me to cover my head, or the circumstances prevail to cover, you know, my arms, I will. I don't mind. But it's also like if you would be on a holiday and you go to Greece and you visit an Orthodox church, you also cover your head and your shoulders. You won't go in there just in your bikini. You know, it's also a matter of respect and to be aware of the circumstances and, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's all we've got time for today on Topic, but thank you very much to our guest,
You're very
Aya
welcome.
Johanna Danielle Durst-Breet. The time is 3:00. Have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.